Hey folks, welcome again to the Un-kvlt vlog series. Now, the last vlog episode I did on the Ramsay movies included in Mondo Macabro's Bollywood horror Blu-ray box set was several months ago. I have no excuse for this huge gap, I was just being a lazy bum. Anyway, a short while ago I saw that people had started receiving their copies of this monstrous set, so I felt I should get off my ass and finish with the last entry in this series, which is Aatma, aka Spirit, directed by Deepak Ramsay. I must confess here that I have a special fondness for Aatma because it was the first Ramsay horror feature which I saw in a cinema. When their classic titles like Purana Mandir, Veerana, and Bandh Darwaza were being screened in movie halls, I was still a school kid and obviously could not go for these adult only rated films. Also, the 80s were the age of VHS, and my household was one among many middle class Indian households that did most of their movie watching at home. Before Atma, I had of course seen other horror films in cinemas, including Hollywood films and some by other Indian horror filmmakers like Ram Gopal Verma, but I was still a virgin to Ramsay style horror on the big screen. So, when in 2006 a new Ramsay horror feature was released, I felt obliged to experience it in a movie theatre. Interestingly enough, the Ramsays had previously retreated from big screen movie making for quite some time. 1994's Mahakal, an unauthorized reimagining of Nightmare on Elm Street, had been the last previous theatrical horror feature from the Ramsay production house. The Indian horror film market by then was in a bad shape with a glut of zero budget, zero talent films killing audience interest in the genre. Ironically, this return to big screen horror was very likely inspired by their foray into television programming. During the early 90s satellite TV boom, the Ramsays produced an anthology series called the Z Horror Show. Household TVs across the country blared the iconic Ramsay theme tune, which had been recycled for the series, and home audiences were both terrified of and delighted by the show. The series had an 8-year run from 1993 to 2001, probably one of the longest running shows on Indian television. Deepak Ramsay, who had previously assisted his father Tulsi Ramsay and Uncle Sham on some of their classic horror films, made his bones, so to say, on the show, directing the majority of the episodes. It is likely that the experience he gained on this show and the long running success it enjoyed planted the idea in Deepak's head of reviving the Ramsay horror banner for the big screen. In fact, several people have likened Atma to an extended episode of the Z Horror Show, which is not a bad thing per se. It reminds me more of the horror and suspense films the Ramsays made for a decade before they hit upon Purana Mandir's monster formula. I quite like this phase of the Ramsays when they were experimenting with a bunch of different narratives, making for some variety in the telling. There is a strong element of EC comic style revenge from beyond the grave here. In this story, a young doctor is visited in the dead of night by a strangely pale bloke that tells him about an autopsy that he will do the next day. He wants the doc to make an honest job of it or suffer horrific consequences. Imagine the doc's surprise when he finds the same bloke the next morning laid out as a corpse on the morgue table. But our doc has a problem. The dead man's relatives have compelled him to pass the murder off as a natural death by threatening to kill his beautiful wife. Having succumbed to their blackmail, he now has to deal with the curse of the dead man's spirit, which is also determined to avenge itself on the murderers. Whether the spirit is successful in its quest for vengeance and whether our doc is able to obtain release from its oppression forms the rest of the narrative. The influence of the Ramsay's TV stint is certainly reflected in Atma, but I think it's mostly to the film's benefit. Moving away from the trademark haunted palace and dungeon locations of their previous films, Atma is firmly entrenched in a contemporary urban setting. Within the crisp 107-minute running time, there is a compact narrative-focused structure and a lesser number of breaks for songs and odious comedy. I appreciated the moral ambiguity. The doc dishonors his profession and pisses off the dead man's spirit with his lies, but he has done it for the safety of his family. Our sympathies are thereby divided between the doc and the wrong spirit. as the murderous villains, Bollywood character actors Sadashiv Amrapurkar and Mukesh Tiwari ham it up in style, and Laila Patel as the vamp oozes macho factor. Deepak also sets up some solid revenge kills for the spirit. My favorite is when an unearthly high pitched scream literally splits open Amrapoka's head, which is a possible low rent hat tip to David Cronenberg's Scanners. Visually, Aatma is a mixed bag. It is colorful but lit in a flat, Fulbright fashion and relies on blue filters for nighttime scenes, a look more suited to TV. It also sometimes eschews practical effects in favor of very rudimentary CG. But veteran camera wizard Gangu Ramsay does bring out his trademark odd angles, and I like some of the modern touches like the use of surveillance cameras to monitor the spirit's activity. It's not high art by any means, but this is pleasing Bollywood style horror entertainment. Going by the screenshots I've seen on the internet, Atma's look seems to be nicely replicated on the Mondo Blu ray. It certainly promises to be a huge upgrade over my current VCD copy, but which I will still keep because it has been autographed by the director. But I can't wait to visit this late era Ramsay horror in proper high definition, so bring it on.